The alien shuttle that came down for Marcus was small and silent. It landed on the lawn outside the council building without a sound, without a gust of wind, as if it simply chose to exist there instead of arriving the normal way. Two soldiers walked him to it. Neither of them spoke. General Reyes shook his hand at the door and told him that the world was watching, which did not help Marcus feel any calmer. Inside, the shuttle had no seats that looked built for a human body, so Marcus stood the whole ride up. He watched Earth shrink below him through a wall that was not quite glass and not quite a screen. He thought about his daughter, who had not spoken to him in years, and wondered if she was watching the news right now, wondering if the strange gray-haired man on every channel was really her father. The flagship up close was bigger than any building Marcus had ever stood inside. The shuttle did not land in a bay. It simply passed through the hull, as if the metal allowed it and nothing else. Marcus stepped out into a long hallway lit by a soft blue light that came from no visible source. The air smelled faintly of metal and something like rain. A single veil waited for him there. It was tall, taller than any human, with skin the color of wet stone and eyes that held no white at all, only deep black with a thin ring of silver around the edge. It wore no armor, no robe, nothing that looked like ceremony. It simply stood, watching him, the way a man might watch an insect he was not yet sure was harmless. "You are not the same human," the veil said. Its voice came out smooth and layered like two tones speaking at once, but the words were in perfect English. The other one was confident. "You are afraid. Why would your kind send someone afraid?" Marcus did not answer right away. He had spent years cleaning hallways exactly like this one, well, not exactly, but long and quiet and full of people who did not see him. He used the silence the way he always had, just to look around, just to notice things. He noticed that the veil had said the other one, and not the woman or Dr. Voss. That told him something. The veil had not bothered to remember her name. Names meant nothing to it yet. Only performance did. "Being afraid does not mean being wrong," Marcus finally said. "And confidence isn't the same as understanding." The veil tilted its head slightly. It seemed almost surprised, though its face did not change in any way Marcus could read. "Walk," it said. They moved through corridors that curved instead of turning at corners, past walls that pulsed faintly with light like something breathing. Marcus saw other veil along the way, all of them pausing to watch him pass, all of them silent. He understood somehow that this whole ship was watching him too. Every camera, every sensor. He was being tested before he had even met the one who mattered. The room they entered at the end of the hallway was enormous, round, with a high ceiling that disappeared into shadow. In the center of it sat a single throne made of the same black metal as the hull outside, and on it sat the Emperor of the Veil. He looked older than the soldier who had brought Marcus there, his stone-gray skin marked with faint lines like cracks in dry earth, his eyes the same deep black but wider, sharper, full of something that looked almost like boredom. Off to the side, kneeling on the floor with her hands bound in some kind of dark restraint, was Dr. Elena Voss. She looked exhausted but unharmed, and when she saw Marcus walk in, her eyes went wide with confusion. "Marcus, why are you here?" "It's a long story," Marcus said gently. "Are you hurt?" "No, just humiliated." She glanced toward the Emperor with something between fear and anger. "He asked me a question I couldn't answer. He's been waiting for someone to answer it ever since." The Emperor rose from his throne. He was taller even than the soldier who had escorted Marcus, and when he spoke, the whole room seemed to hum with the sound of his voice. "Another human," the Emperor said. "Your kind sends so many small creatures to stand before me. Tell me, small one, do you know why I asked the first human a question, and why I will ask you the very same one?" Marcus shook his head honestly. "No, but I imagine you're about to tell me." A few of the veil guards near the wall shifted, as if such a plain answer was strange to them. The Emperor's silver-ringed eyes narrowed slightly. "We have crossed empires," the Emperor said. "We have judged 1,000 worlds before yours. Every civilization we meet, we test the same way. We do not care about your weapons. We do not care about your numbers. We care only about one thing, whether your minds can bend towards something they have never seen before. A species that cannot do this is not worth conquering. It is not even worth speaking to. It will fade on its own in time, the way dead branches fall from a living tree. He raised one long gray hand, and in the air above his palm, light gathered into shapes, strange, shifting symbols that turned and folded over each other, never staying still long enough for Marcus to study them properly. "This is a sentence," the emperor said, "a simple one in the oldest trade tongue of my people. I have given this same sentence to 41 species before yours. 17 of them solved it. The rest did not, and we did not stay to speak with them further." "What happened to the ones who didn't solve it?" Marcus asked. "They continued to exist," the emperor said almost lazily. "We are not cruel for the sake of cruelty. We simply left. No trade, no alliance, no protection when other things came hunting in the dark between stars. Some of those worlds are gone now, eaten by things far less patient than us." Alina made a small, strangled sound at that. Marcus kept his eyes on the shifting light above the emperor's hand. "Translate this, human," the emperor said, and his voice dropped into something almost amused, almost cruel, the exact tone of a man asking a question he was certain would not be answered. "If you can, though I do not expect you to do better than the last one." The shape spun once more in the air and then froze, hanging there like frost on glass, waiting. Marcus stepped closer, ignoring the way the guards along the wall tensed at his movement. He studied the frozen symbols carefully, the way he used to study a 4,000-year-old scrap of clay tablet in a quiet lab that no longer existed. He noticed the way certain shapes repeated, just slightly altered each time, like a word said 3 different ways. He noticed that some symbols leaned toward each other, almost touching, while others stood far apart, isolated. He thought of the rhythm he had heard back on Earth in the very first message. He thought about how dead languages were never really dead. They only seemed that way to people who did not know how to listen. "Give me time," Marcus said quietly. "Not very long, but more than you gave her." The emperor's eyes narrowed again, but after a long pause he tilted his head, the alien equivalent, Marcus guessed, of a small nod. "You have until the light fades," the emperor said, and gestured upward, where a faint glow along the domed ceiling had begun, almost invisibly to dim. Marcus turned back to the floating symbols, his heart pounding, his hands steady for the first time since he had stepped onto the ship. Behind him, Alina watched in stunned silence, and somewhere far below, on a planet full of people who did not know his name, every screen on Earth showed his face, waiting to see what the janitor would do next. Marcus stood in front of the floating symbols for a long moment, saying nothing. The emperor settled back into his throne, his long fingers resting against the black metal armrest, watching with the patient stillness of someone who had seen this moment fail many times before and expected nothing different now. The light along the high ceiling kept dimming, slow and steady, like a sun going down somewhere far above them. Marcus understood that he was not just being given time. He was being given a clock, the same way the council back on Earth had been given a countdown. The veil seemed to like clocks. Maybe, Marcus thought, that told him something about them too, a people who measured everything, who never simply waited without watching the minutes fall away. He walked slowly around the floating shapes, studying them from different angles, the way he used to walk around an old clay tablet laid out on a lab table. Alina watched him from where she knelt, her bound hands resting in her lap, her eyes following his every movement with a mixture of hope and disbelief. "You see something," she whispered, "don't you?" "Maybe," Marcus said. "Give me a minute." He noticed again how certain shapes repeated with small differences, like the same word spoken with a different feeling each time. In every dead language he had ever studied, that kind of repetition usually meant emphasis, or tense, or sometimes respect, a way of marking who was speaking to whom. He noticed, too, that one shape stood at the very center of the sentence, larger than the rest, with all the others curling toward it like petals toward the middle of a flower. That, Marcus guessed, was the heart of the sentence, the subject, the thing the whole message was actually about. This symbol, Marcus said, pointing toward the central shape without touching it, is not a word. I think it's a name. The Emperor's eyes flickered, just slightly. It was a small thing, but Marcus had spent a lifetime noticing small things in people who did not want to be noticed. Go on, the Emperor said. The shapes around it change their distance depending on how close or far they lean, Marcus continued, thinking aloud now, the way he used to back in his old lab, except back then nobody important had ever been listening. That's not just decoration. I think it's grammar. Closer means stronger connection. Further means distance, maybe disagreement, maybe just description. So if I read this whole sentence like a kind of orbit with everything bending around that center symbol. He stopped. He felt it click into place the way an old, stubborn door finally swings open after years of being stuck. Alina saw something shift in his face and leaned forward as far as her restraints allowed. What is it? She asked. Marcus turned to the Emperor instead of answering her directly. This sentence isn't really about words at all, Marcus said. It's a description of relationship, of belonging. The shapes aren't just describing things, they're describing how things are connected to each other. The center symbol is something the rest of the sentence orbits around, the same way a family orbits around an elder, or a people orbit around a name they're proud of. He looked up at the Emperor. You're not asking us to translate words. You're asking us to recognize what something means to someone else. That's why the others failed. They were trying to translate language. You wanted them to translate meaning. For the first time since Marcus had entered the room, something shifted in the Emperor's expression. It was not quite a smile. Veiled faces did not seem built for that, but the lines along his stone-gray skin deepened slightly, like a man leaning forward despite himself. Continue, the Emperor said, his voice quieter now than before. Marcus turned back to the shapes, his mind racing. He thought about the central symbol again, large and steady, with the others bending toward it like they admired it, like they depended on it. If I'm right, Marcus said slowly, then this whole sentence says something like, this world belongs to the ones who came before and we honor them by remaining patient. Or something close to that. It's not a threat. It's not even a test of intelligence, not really. It's a test of whether we understand what patience and belonging mean to your people, whether we can recognize devotion when we see it, even in a shape we've never seen before. Silence filled the round room. The light above kept fading, slower now, as if even the ship itself was listening. The Emperor rose from his throne, and this time his movements were not lazy or amused. He walked toward Marcus with slow, deliberate steps, his black eyes fixed on the floating symbols rather than on the small human standing beneath them. In 4,000 cycles, the Emperor said, only 6 minds before yours have understood the second layer of that sentence. Most who pass my test understand only that it describes connection. You understood that it describes devotion. There is a difference, small one, and the difference matters more than you know. Alina let out a breath she had clearly been holding for a long time. Does that mean he passed? The Emperor did not look at her. His eyes stayed on Marcus, studying him with something that looked, for the first time, less like judgment and more like curiosity. It means, the Emperor said, that this human is worth more conversation than I expected to have today. He raised his hand again, and the floating shapes dissolved into light, scattering upward like sparks rising from a fire. In their place, new symbols began to form, more complex this time, twisting and weaving together in patterns that made Marcus's eyes ache just looking at them. This is not the end of the test, the Emperor said. It is only the beginning of a longer one. 41 species came before yours. 17 passed the first sentence. Of those 17, only 3 understood what came next. And the other 14, Marcus asked carefully. They believed passing the first test meant they had earned my respect entirely, the Emperor said. They grew confident. Confidence, small one, is the thing that kills understanding fastest. The moment a mind believes it already knows the answer, it stops listening for the true one. Marcus glanced at Alina, who was watching him now with something that looked almost like fear, Not fear of the Emperor, but fear for him. For what might happen if he failed this next part the way she had failed the first. What happened to the 14 who grew confident? Marcus asked. They were sent home, the Emperor said simply. Their worlds were marked as not yet ready. We do not return to worlds marked this way for many generations, if ever. Some such worlds wait so long that they destroy themselves before we ever come back. The weight of that settled heavily over the room. Marcus understood now exactly what was at stake, not just for Alina, not just for himself, but for every person on Earth who was watching this moment unfold across every screen on the planet. One wrong assumption, one flash of overconfidence. That was all it would take to lose everything, maybe for generations, maybe forever. He looked back at the new symbols floating above the Emperor's palm. They were far more complicated than before, swirling together in long ribbons of light that folded and unfolded endlessly, never settling. "Can I ask you something first?" Marcus said, "before I try?" The Emperor's eyes narrowed slightly, as if such a request had rarely, if ever, been made of him. "Speak." The first sentence was about devotion, about a world belonging to those who came before, Marcus said. Is this test connected to the first, or is it something else entirely? For a long moment the Emperor said nothing. Then slowly, the lines along his gray skin deepened again, and his voice came out lower, almost thoughtful. You are the first mind in 4,000 cycles to ask that question before attempting the second test, the Emperor said. Most assume each test stands alone. None of them have asked whether one piece might depend on understanding the whole. He studied Marcus for a long moment, his black eyes catching the dimming light above. Yes, the Emperor finally said. It is connected. Everything I show you is connected. That is perhaps the truest test of all, whether a mind can see the whole shape of something, instead of only the piece placed directly in front of it. Marcus felt something settle in his chest, something steady and certain, the same feeling he used to get in his old lab when a stubborn tablet finally started giving up its secrets after years of silence. He looked up at the swirling shapes above the Emperor's palm, and for the first time since stepping onto the ship, he allowed himself the smallest flicker of hope. Then let's see the whole shape, Marcus said. The light above the dome dimmed further, and somewhere far below, on a small blue planet spinning quietly through the dark, millions of people leaned closer to their screens, holding their breath, waiting to see what the janitor would do next. The new symbols hung in the air above the Emperor's palm, twisting slowly like smoke caught in still water. Marcus stepped closer, ignoring the way his own breathing had grown shallow, ignoring the soldiers along the wall who watched him the way hunters watch something that might still bite. He let his eyes move across the shapes the same patient way he used to read old broken tablets, piece by piece, never rushing, never assuming. Alina watched him from the floor, her bound hand still resting in her lap. She had stopped asking questions for now. She seemed to understand, the same way Marcus did, that the room needed silence more than it needed words. These shapes move differently than the first ones, Marcus said slowly. The first sentence had everything bending toward one center. This one doesn't have a center at all. Everything is connected to everything else, like a web instead of a wheel. Describe what a web means to your kind, the Emperor said. It was not quite a question. It sounded more like an invitation. Marcus thought for a moment. A web means dependence. No single piece holds it together. If you cut one thread, the whole shape changes. Sometimes the whole thing collapses. Nothing in a web stands alone. And does that frighten you? The Emperor asked. Marcus considered the question carefully before answering, the same way he had learned long ago that careless words could ruin years of careful work. No, he said finally. It reminds me of family, of community. Things that aren't strong because one piece is powerful, but because every piece depends on every other piece holding on. The Emperor's stone-gray face shifted again, the deep lines along his skin folding inward, an expression Marcus still could not fully read but had begun to associate cautiously with something like respect. Then you already understand more than you realize, the emperor said. This sentence is not a description of devotion like the first. It is a description of obligation, of duty passed between many, none of which is greater than the rest. Marcus studied the shifting shapes again, searching now with new eyes. He noticed thin lines of light connecting each twisting symbol to several others at once, some thick and bright, some so faint they nearly vanished, only to brighten again a moment later as the whole pattern slowly turned. The bright threads are stronger duties, Marcus said, almost to himself. The faint ones are weaker or maybe newer, obligations that haven't been tested yet. Yes, the emperor said. And it's still turning, Marcus continued, watching the slow rotation of the whole web of light. It's not static. The duties shift depending on what's needed. Strength moves between them like blood moving through a body. Whoever needs to carry the weight at a given moment carries it, and then it passes to someone else when the need changes. The emperor went very still. Even the soldiers along the wall seemed to lean forward slightly, as if the entire room were holding its breath along with Alina. In 4,000 cycles, the emperor said quietly, no mind from outside my own people has described the web of duty so precisely on a first attempt. Tell me, small one, how does a creature who cleans hallways for a living come to understand something my own scholars spend 100 cycles learning? Marcus felt the question land somewhere deep, somewhere he had not let anyone reach in a very long time. He thought of his wife, gone now for 15 years. He thought of his daughter who had stopped speaking to him not because he had done anything cruel, but because after his wife died, he had simply stopped showing up, stopped being someone worth talking to. He had buried himself in silence and mop water because thinking too hard, caring too much, had cost him everything once already. Because I spent my whole life learning that nothing stands alone, Marcus said quietly. Not languages, not people. I learned it the hard way by losing the people I should have held onto tighter. A web only holds if everyone keeps their thread strong. I let mine go slack once. I don't plan on making that mistake again. The room was silent. Even Alina, who had known Marcus for years as nothing more than a quiet face in the hallways of the council building, looked at him now like she was seeing him clearly for the first time. The emperor studied Marcus for a long moment, his black, silver-ringed eyes unreadable. Then, slowly, he lowered his hand, and the glowing web of symbols folded in on itself and vanished, like a held breath finally released. There will be one more test, the emperor said. The hardest of the three. Many minds before yours believed they understood duty and devotion, only to fail when asked to understand consequence. What do you mean by consequence? Marcus asked. The emperor did not answer immediately. Instead, he turned and walked back toward his throne, his long stride slow and deliberate, his cloak, if it could be called that, dark and seamless like poured metal, trailing behind him without a sound. Devotion tells you what a people values, the emperor said, settling back onto the throne. Duty tells you how a people holds itself together. Consequence tells you what a people is willing to lose in order to protect both. It is the heaviest of the three because it cannot be understood through pattern alone. It must be understood through choice. He raised his hand a final time, and a single shape appeared above his palm, smaller than the others, almost plain by comparison. A simple curved line that pulsed faintly, like something breathing, like something alive. This is not a sentence, the emperor said. It is a memory. I will show it to you, and you will tell me what it means, and your answer will decide far more than whether you understand my language. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. Beside him, Alina shifted uncomfortably, her eyes darting between Marcus and the emperor, clearly unsure what was about to happen. Wait, she said suddenly. What does that mean it will decide more than what? The emperor's eyes flicked toward her, the first real attention he had given her since Marcus arrived. Your kind asked us to translate ourselves to you, so that you might be judged worthy of speaking with us as equals. But understanding works both ways. Whatever this human shows me about how he reads consequence will also tell me what your entire species is willing to do and willing to lose to survive. He looked back to Marcus. Are you prepared? Marcus glanced once more at Alina, who gave him the smallest nod, equal parts fear and faith. He thought about the people back on Earth, General Reyes packing in that crowded room, the soldier who had returned shaking and pale, the millions of faces pressed close to screens all over the planet, waiting on a man none of them had ever respected enough to learn his name. I'm ready, Marcus said. The curved shape above the Emperor's palm pulsed once, brighter, and then unfolded, not into words this time, not into symbols, but into something closer to a vision. Marcus felt the room tilt slightly around him as the image bloomed into the air before his eyes. A world, blue and green, not unlike Earth, but with two moons instead of one, hanging low and heavy in a violet sky. He saw cities along a coastline, towers built from something that looked like pale coral, and creatures that were not human and not veil, smaller, gentler, gathering in great crowds beneath the open air. And then slowly, terribly, he saw the world begin to burn. Not from any weapon, not from any war. The fire came from below, from deep within the planet itself, the ground splitting open as if it could no longer hold its own weight, the violet sky choking with ash and smoke until it turned black. This is one of the worlds that failed your tests, Marcus said quietly, understanding settling over him like cold water. This is what you meant, about worlds that wait too long, about things hunting in the dark. No, the Emperor said, and his voice for the first time did not sound steady at all. This was my world, small one, before the veil ever left it, before we became what you see standing before you now. This is the memory of the day we learned ourselves, what consequence truly means. The vision held there, burning silently in the air between them, and Marcus understood, with a chill settling deep into his bones, that whatever he said next would matter more than anything he had said since stepping onto this ship. The burning world hung in the air between them, silent except for the faint crackle of light that gave it shape. Marcus stared at it, his mind racing, trying to understand what kind of answer the Emperor could possibly want from a memory like this. Alina had gone completely still on the floor beside him, her eyes wide, her bound hands gripping each other tightly in her lap. I don't understand, Marcus said slowly. You said this was your world, before you became what you are now. What happened to it? The Emperor did not answer right away. He watched the burning vision with an expression that, for the first time since Marcus had stepped into the room, looked almost like grief, if grief could exist on a face made of cracked stone. My people were not always travelers among the stars, the Emperor said. We were once a people who only looked upward, never outward. We built cities along the coral coasts. We measured our lives by the rise and fall of two moons. We believed, as many young worlds believe, that we had endless time to decide who we wanted to become. He raised one hand slightly, and the vision shifted, the ash and fire pulling back just enough to show, beneath the smoke, a smaller image veil, not yet wearing the dark armor Marcus had seen on the soldiers in the hallway, gathered instead in simple robes, arguing with each other beneath a cracked sky. There were two paths before us, the Emperor continued. One path called for immediate sacrifice, to gather everyone we could, to leave the dying world behind quickly, and accept that many would be left, because there was not enough time or strength to save them all. The other path called for patience, to try to save everyone, even if it meant staying longer than was safe, even if it meant risking the ships that could carry us away at all. Which path did your people choose? Marcus asked quietly, though some terrible part of him already suspected the answer from the way the Emperor's voice had grown heavier with every word. We chose patience, the Emperor said. We believed devotion to one another was worth any risk. We stayed as long as we could. We saved nearly everyone who could be saved. He paused, and the vision dimmed for a moment, showing rows of ships lifting away from the cracking earth, crowded with figures crammed shoulder to shoulder. But the ground did not wait for our devotion to finish its work. The final ships, carrying those who waited to help others board first, were lost. My own bondmate was among them. The room was utterly silent. Even the soldiers along the wall, who Marcus guessed had heard this story many times before, stood with their heads slightly lowered. "I'm sorry," Marcus said, and he meant it completely. "Do not be sorry," the Emperor said. "Be informed. This is why I show this memory to every species I judge worthy of the first 2 tests, because the question I ask you now is not about language or duty or devotion. It is this: knowing what patience cost my people, would you have made the same choice? Or would you have chosen the other path, the path of immediate sacrifice, leaving many behind to save the rest more safely?" Marcus felt the weight of the question settle over him like a physical thing. He understood, suddenly and completely, why 14 species had failed this test after passing the first 2. Confidence was easy when the answer involved patterns and symbols. Confidence became something far more dangerous when the answer involved choosing, even in theory, who might be left behind. He glanced at Alina. She was watching him, her face pale, clearly terrified of what he might say, clearly more terrified of what might happen if he said the wrong thing. "Can I ask you something before I answer?" Marcus said. The Emperor's eyes narrowed slightly, though there was less impatience in the gesture now than there had been with the earlier tests. "You have asked questions before each answer so far. It has served you well. Ask." "Do you regret the choice your people made?" Marcus asked, "knowing what it cost?" The Emperor was quiet for a long moment. The burning vision pulsed faintly above his palm, the ship still frozen mid-flight in the smoke-dark sky. "No," the Emperor finally said. "We grieve it. Grief and regret are not the same thing, small one. Regret means believing you would choose differently if given the chance again. We would not. We simply grieve what patience cost us, even as we know it was the only choice that let us remain who we wanted to be." Marcus nodded slowly, something settling into place in his mind, the same way a stubborn lock finally gives way after the right amount of careful pressure. "Then I think I understand what you're really asking," Marcus said. "You're not asking whether I choose the safer path or the harder one. You're asking whether my people are willing to lose something in order to remain who we want to be, even when losing nothing would be easier." The Emperor said nothing, but his black eyes stayed fixed on Marcus, waiting. "I can't speak for every person on Earth," Marcus continued. "I'm not a king. I'm not even a diplomat. I'm a man who mops floors for a living, and 3 days ago nobody in my own government would have trusted me to answer a question this size." He paused, glancing briefly toward Alina before looking back at the Emperor. "But I can tell you this. My people have made the same choice yours did more than once, in smaller ways nobody remembers afterward. We have run into burning buildings for strangers. We have given up safety to protect people who could never repay us. We are not perfect at it. We fail sometimes, and when we fail, we carry that failure for the rest of our lives, the way you carry the loss of your bondmate. But given the choice between safety and staying true to who we want to be, more often than not, we choose to stay." The vision above the Emperor's palm flickered, and for just a moment, the ships in the smoke-dark sky seemed to glow brighter, as if something in the memory itself had responded to the answer. "You cannot know that this is true for your entire species," the Emperor said. "You said so yourself." "No," Marcus admitted. "I can't know it for certain, but I know it's true for some of us. And I know that the people willing to make that choice are usually the ones who end up deciding what a whole species becomes, even if the rest never agree with them at first. That's how my people abolished things we once thought were necessary. That's how we built peace after wars that should have destroyed us. Not because everyone agreed at once, but because enough of us chose patience and devotion when it would have been easier not to." The Emperor lowered his hand slowly, and the burning vision folded inward, shrinking smaller and smaller until it vanished completely, leaving the round room dim and quiet except for the faint blue light still pulsing along the walls. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Alina seemed afraid to breathe too loudly. The soldiers along the wall stood frozen, waiting. Finally, the Emperor rose from his throne. He walked toward Marcus slowly, and for the first time, Marcus realized just how much taller the Emperor truly was, towering over him by nearly 2 feet. his black eyes catching what little light remained in the room. 3 tests, the Emperor said quietly. Devotion, duty, consequence. In 4,000 cycles, only 2 minds before yours have answered all 3 without faltering once. What happened to those 2? Marcus asked carefully. Their worlds became allies of the Veil, the Emperor said. Trusted, protected, spoken to as equals, not judged again for 100 generations. He paused. You have answered as they did, perhaps better. The first 2 understood the shape of the questions. You understood the cost behind them. Alina let out a small, shaking breath, somewhere between a laugh and a sob. Does that mean we passed? Does that mean Earth is safe? The Emperor turned his head toward her, and this time, something in his stone-gray face shifted into an expression that almost looked like respect. It means, the Emperor said, that I am willing to speak with your species as something other than a curiosity to be measured and discarded. He looked back to Marcus. But there is one more thing left to decide, not a test of language or duty or memory, a test of choice, yours alone, small one, not your species. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. What kind of choice? The Emperor's eyes held his, steady and unreadable, the blue light of the ship pulsing gently around them both. The kind, the Emperor said, that will decide whether you return to the small, quiet life you tried so hard to disappear into, or whether the universe has decided, whether you wished it or not, that you are needed for something far larger than a mop and an empty hallway. Blue light pulsed quietly around them as Marcus stood facing the Emperor, the weight of the last question settling over him like a held breath that refused to release. Beside him, Alina had gone still, watching him with an expression that mixed hope and worry in equal measure. I don't understand, Marcus said. What choice is there to make? You said Earth would be safe. Doesn't that mean I can go home? Your world will be safe, the Emperor said. That was decided the moment you answered the 3rd test honestly, but safety for a world and purpose for a single mind are not the same thing. He stepped closer, his shadow falling long across the floor in the dim light. I offer you a choice, small one, because few minds in the history of my people have ever earned the right to be offered one at all. He raised his hand once more, and a new shape unfolded above his palm. Not a sentence this time, not a memory, but something simpler. A single bridge of light, stretching between 2 points that Marcus did not recognize at first, until he understood that one side showed Earth, small and blue and spinning quietly in the dark, and the other side showed countless other lights scattered across the void, worlds the Veil had visited, worlds still waiting to be judged. The first choice, the Emperor said, is to return home, to go back to your hallways, your mop, your quiet life. Your people will remember you as the one who saved them, and then in time, as people do, they will move on, and you will be allowed to fade back into the silence you sought for 11 years. No one will ask anything more of you again. Marcus felt something tighten in his chest at those words. A part of him, a tired, old part that had buried itself in empty hallways and trash cans for over a decade, wanted exactly that. Wanted to disappear again, safely, quietly, the way he had trained himself to disappear after losing his wife. And the second choice, Marcus asked, though some part of him already suspected what it would be. The second choice, the Emperor said, is to become something new, a voice between worlds. My people do not often find translators who understand not just words but the weight behind them. If you choose this path, you will not return to a quiet hallway. You will travel between stars, judging and being judged, helping worlds like yours understand worlds like mine, for as long as your life allows it. Alina spoke up before Marcus could answer, her voice trembling but firm. Marcus, you don't have to do this. You already gave them everything they asked for. Nobody would blame you for going home. I know, Marcus said quietly, not looking away from the Emperor. That's exactly the problem. The Emperor tilted his head slightly, waiting. Marcus thought about his 11 years of silence. He thought about the hallways he had walked, head down, mop in hand, telling himself the world did not need another man who thought too hard or cared too much. He thought about his daughter, who had stopped speaking to him not because he had failed at something large, but because he had quietly stopped trying at something small, at being present, at staying connected, at keeping his thread strong in the web that had once held his whole life together. He thought about the burning world the Emperor had shown him, and the choice the Veil had made long ago, knowing it would cost them everything, choosing anyway because patience and devotion were worth the price. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus said. "You have asked many things today," the Emperor said. "Ask one more." "If I go home," Marcus said slowly, "and live the rest of my life mopping floors, pretending none of this happened, will my world still be safe? Will you still treat us as equals the way you said?" "Yes," the Emperor said. "That has already been decided. It does not depend on what you choose now." "Then why does it matter what I choose?" Marcus asked. "If Earth's safety isn't part of it." The Emperor studied him for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice had softened into something almost gentle. "Because, small one, the universe is full of minds capable of solving a single test and walking away satisfied. It is rare to find a mind willing to keep solving, long after the reward for stopping has already been earned. I do not offer you this choice because your world requires it. I offer it because I suspect, somewhere beneath that tired and quiet life you built for yourself, there is still a mind that does not want to stop now that it has started again." Marcus closed his eyes for a moment. He thought of the years he had spent convincing himself that wanting nothing was the same as being at peace. He thought of how alive he had felt the moment he recognized the rhythm hidden in the Veil's first message, how something in him that had been sleeping for 15 years had opened its eyes again the instant the council played that recording. He thought about his daughter one more time, and for the first time in a long while, he did not think about her with guilt. He thought about what she might say if she saw him now, not as the man who had disappeared after her mother died, but as the man who had stepped forward when an entire planet had nothing left to offer but silence. Maybe, Marcus thought, this was the only way to finally make that silence between them mean something different. "I want to talk to my daughter first," Marcus said, "before I decide anything, if that's allowed." The Emperor considered this for a moment, then inclined his head. "It is allowed. Family is not a small thing to my people either." A communication was arranged within minutes, patched through the same channels the council had used to broadcast the entire ordeal to the world. Marcus stood in the round, blue-lit room and watched a small screen flicker to life, showing his daughter's face for the first time in 3 years. She looked older than he remembered, tired in a way that mirrored his own, her eyes red from crying, though whether from fear or relief, Marcus could not yet tell. "Dad," she said, her voice breaking, "is it really you? They said you were the one up there. They said you were the one talking to it." "It's really me," Marcus said softly. "I didn't know you could do any of this," she said. "I didn't know you used to be. I mean, I knew you studied languages once, but I never understood what that meant. Why didn't you ever tell me?" Marcus felt his throat tighten. "Because after your mother died, I convinced myself that being someone who mattered cost too much. I thought disappearing was safer, for both of us." His daughter was quiet for a moment, wiping at her eyes. "You scared me today, watching you up there, not knowing if you'd come back, but I haven't been this proud of you in years, maybe ever." "They're offering me a choice," Marcus said. "I can come home and go back to how things were, or I can keep doing this, traveling, translating, helping other worlds the way I helped ours today. I don't know what's right." His daughter looked at him for a long moment, the kind of look that reminded him achingly of her mother. "Dad, the man I remember from before Mom died wasn't someone who hid in hallways. He was someone who got excited about dead languages nobody else cared about. He used to keep me up past my bedtime explaining how old alphabets worked, and I pretended to be bored, but I wasn't. I love that you cared about things that much." She paused. "I don't want you to disappear again. But I also don't want you to stay small just because you think that's what's safe for me. I'd rather have a father who's somewhere far away doing something that matters than one who's nearby and not really there at all." Marcus felt something break open in his chest, gentle and overdue, like a window finally allowed to open after years of being sealed shut. "I love you," he said. I should have said that more before all of this. I love you too, Dad, she said, smiling through her tears. Go translate the galaxy, just don't forget to call. The screen faded, and Marcus stood quietly for a moment, letting the conversation settle into him. When he turned back to the Emperor, his decision was already steady in his chest, the way a long-buried truth feels once it is finally allowed to surface. I'll go, Marcus said. I'll be your translator, not because Earth needs me to, because I think I need to remember what it feels like to matter again. The Emperor studied him for a long moment, and then, for the first time since Marcus had stepped onto the ship, something that might have actually been a smile crossed his stone-gray features, small, faint, but unmistakably real. Then let us begin, the Emperor said. There are 40 worlds still waiting to be judged, small one, and I find myself curious, for the first time in many cycles, to see how a mind like yours might change the way that judgment is given. Behind them, Alina was finally helped to her feet, her restraints removed, her relief and amazement plain on her face as she watched the quiet janitor who had once been invisible in the halls of the council building step forward into a future no one, least of all himself, could have ever predicted. And far below, on a small blue world spinning quietly through the dark, the people of Earth watched their screens in stunned silence, slowly beginning to understand that the universe had just sent them a stranger's question, and a janitor named Marcus Holt had answered it perfectly.